Are you going to say something about the Eagles? You can wear your t-shirt, especially since no one can see it. But if you
Gabrielle.
say something about the Eagles and then we go to black, then
Gabrielle,
you,
we are going to be live in any minute.
let's see, do I need these to start? No.
And we are live. It is August 1st, 2025. We are here on the Prospect Weekly Roundup, our look at the news and views of the week. I'm David Dayan, your executive editor of the American Prospect, and with me today is Gabrielle Gurley, our senior editor here at the Prospect. Gabrielle, welcome to the show.
Thank you, David. Good to be here.
All right. As you can see, I'm in my Eagles jersey here because we're going to be talking sports a little bit, and specifically a feature story that Gabrielle produced for us for our latest issue, the August issue of the Prospect, which we've been rolling out this week. A lot of great stories in there. You can check it out at prospect.org. You should have the link to Gabrielle's story in the chat, which you can take a look at right now. And it involves yet another of the many stadium deals that we've seen over the years in the United States. Typical thing is that public ends up being on the hook for a billionaire show palace, essentially. And DC is an interesting case for this for a variety of reasons. It's a very good story that Gabrielle put out. And, I guess, Gabrielle, we can start with asking, this has become sort of pardon the pun, but a political football and a civic imperative of the mayor of DC, Muriel Bowser. It seems to have been her crusade for a long time to get the Washington football team, which is now known as the Commanders, back into DC. Why is this such a passion project for her?
Well, I think in part, NFL fans are across the country are pretty passionate, and obviously, I would dare say that Washington fans are at the top of the heap when it comes to that passion, particularly since their team does not play in Washington, D.C. They play in Maryland.
Hmm.
Um, some decades ago, there was a dispute between another Washington mayor and the team owner. And the mayor, Sharon Texan, did not want to meet the price. And so the team went to Maryland. The team is now playing in Landover, Maryland, which is not very far from the district, but of course it is in Maryland. So Washington fans, like so many um, fans whose teams have left have not gotten over it, even though they can get on the metro and go to the games. I think the second problem is people hate the venue. So the team left. It would have been one thing if they had gone off to a venue that people could appreciate, but there's a lot of unhappiness among fans about the venue um, for a variety of reasons. And it's sort of a long, simmering gee, wouldn't it be nice? And that's complicated by the fact that once the team left the stadium, which is 22 blocks behind the Capitol, it's not a long walk. Um, the the stadium is still there. It
Yeah.
wasn't torn down for something else. It was never refurbished. It is literally rusting
Yeah,
before
it's not
eyes of the
used, right?
city.
It's just
It
sort of a
is not
hulking
used.
mess.
It
Yeah.
is surrounded by a chain link fence and weeds, and it's just sitting there. It's just sitting there
But
rusting.
do you think that there's an element of nostalgia here? That there's this appeal to restoring what was known as RFK Stadium. I doubt it'll be called RFK Junior Stadium, but
It may
since the
be.
Kennedy Center might become the Trump Center, maybe that's going to be the price. But is there nostalgia here to restore RFK Stadium? Was a sense of when not just the Washington football team being good, but also DC kind of thriving.
I think that's it. I think first off about the name, Robert F. Kennedy, the full name of the stadium is the RF Robert F. Kennedy Memorial Stadium. It's unclear if they're going to keep that, but there is some interest in keeping that name.
Hmm.
Uh, RFK just kind of rolls trippingly off the tongue. It's what everyone calls it.
Right.
And that's part of the nostalgia. Whether it will change to the Washington Commanders stadiums or something else, I think is still a little
People
bit
will
up
probably
in the
always
air.
call it RFK anyway.
They will always call it RFK anyway, and in the legislation, there is are provisions to keep it as a memorial to
Mm.
RFK. So
Well, you
that is
mentioned
coming.
legislation. Let's just mention explain what you're talking about there. So
Okay,
there
there
was
is
legislation, federal legislation that was needed to kickstart this project, right?
right. There's federal legislation to transfer the property, which is still federal property, but it is now under a 99-year lease to the district.
Okay.
Uh, the Washington City Council is at this very moment, um, if they have been on time to start the process of voting, is going to be voting on the city legislation for the stadium and the various provisions. So within that legislation, I believe that there is a component to have some sort of memorial preserved
Hmm.
for RFK.
Right.
As
But
far
I
as in
mean,
this, go ahead.
yeah, what is so that's, part of the deal, but really we're talking about refurbishing this stadium and making it the home stadium of the Washington Commanders. So what is the just let me talk maybe talk broadly about the outline of this plan. What
Yeah,
what
well,
are-
the
what are we
stadium
going to
is
see?
it's in the process of being demolished. So they are going to build from the ground up
Got it.
uh, a new stadium. Um, the mayor actually sat down with the team and came up with what was called an initial term sheet. It was a memorandum of understanding about what the deal would look like. And that set off a whole chain of events that brought us to this vote today. Basically, the mayor was the author of a massive giveaway to the team,
Mm.
which incensed the city, from the passionate fans right on down to folks who couldn't care less about football. She basically concluded a deal that gave all sales taxes and parking revenues to the team.
Hmm.
She came up with a plan as far as the rent for the parcels that put out a $1 rent on the five parcels, $1
Mm.
annual rent on the five parcels contiguous to the stadium itself, and a $1 rent on a commercial zone, because this is not only a stadium deal, it is a stadium entertainment district deal. And
Aha.
so the $1 rent just sent people into a flight of anger, I find a frenzy of anger. There's no pilot agreement. There was no community benefits agreement. There just were so many things lacking in the term sheet that she signed.
And the
That,
city is contributing money to this as well. It's not just that they're
yeah,
not getting rent in the aftermath, but
right.
on
They are
up
contributing.
front they're contributing, right?
Up front, they're contributing money. The team is putting up $2.7 billion for construction, and the city itself is kicking in $1 billion. That $1 billion figure also incensed people because the mayor has just signed, well, at the end of last year, signed a deal to keep um, the Washington Wizards and
And the capitals, yes.
Capitals in DC. So that's $515 million for them. And the city has a big hole in its budget because of the failure of Congress to sign off on its budget. So that hole was $410 million. So there are a lot of holes in the budget. And so having another 15, excuse me, another $1 billion bill to keep after raise the question is how is DC going to do that?
Right. And what is her rationale for this? Is it that this is going to bring economic activity? Like, how could you possibly, at this time of economic tumult, and we'll talk about more about that a little bit later, but how at this time could you justify it, this expense?
Well, if you have been reading the press releases that I've gotten from the mayor's office, they recently have been labeled Sports City, Sports Central. Her vision, as I understand it, particularly with the federal government in meltdown, is to create or is to establish Washington as a sports and entertainment destination,
Okay.
that you will come here, you will enjoy the nationals in the summer, the soccer team, DC United. You'll enjoy the Commanders. You'll enjoy the Wizards and the Capitals, and the entertainment activities are around them. So I think this is a centerpiece of her grand plan to make that transformation. And that is why it's so important to her. One, as a vehicle for this, and two, to capitalize on the passion of Washington fans to bring the team home, as is the slogan that keeps getting bandied about.
I mean, that seems insane to me. This
It
idea
seems insane to you. Why is that, David?
this idea that you can base your economy on Jaden Daniels when this is coming at a time when DC is in all this crisis. There are
Mhm.
these Doge cuts, and I want to get into that and explain
Yeah,
it more directly. But you have all these problems, and you think that, I mean, it seems like the analogy would be all of these cities that say, oh, you know what's going to save us? Gambling. That we'll
yeah,
turn
to
to
some
we'll
extent.
add a casino and that'll solve all our problems. This seems even crazier considering that, you're talking about 8 to 10 games a year when
Mhm.
you're talking about the Commanders. And maybe you use that stadium for other purposes, but it just doesn't seem like, and there have been studies, right, of
There
what the
have
economic
been
impact of stadiums are. So yeah, talk about that.
libraries are groaning with studies. Computers will probably crash with all the
Yeah.
gigabytes of studies that have been done on stadiums. To be fair to the mayor, she also wants to see DC as a tech hub. She also
Okay.
wants to bring, well, this is kind of problematic now, bring universities to establish Washington campuses here. So it is part of a vision. It is,
Right.
as you point out, it's a little suspect how much an attraction sports is to folks outside the District, Maryland, and Virginia, the DMV.
Right.
Now, the other thing is she wants to use the stadium for big events like the Super Bowl. This stadium will have a roof. But again, that's an annual event that gets spread around. It's not like the Super Bowl is going to be headquartered in Washington
Right.
from here on in. So she is grasping at the straws that she can. You have to remember that a DC mayor, a Washington DC mayor is in a bad place.
Right.
That person has no control over their budget and must always wait, no matter which party controls the federal
Mhm.
government, they have to wait for a sign off.
Right.
And there is interest, and we'll get to that, in Congress and in the White House on seeing this stadium built. So she's trying to get that done.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, maybe we could talk about the context here because there are two things that have happened
Hmm.
as far as the DC economy. So, one, you mentioned that Congress, because of the omnibus budget deal that they did, I think
Hmm.
back in March,
Hmm.
that created a big hole in the DC budget. So that was one half of it, and then, of course, all of this assault on the federal workforce. The federal workforce is the economic base of the city of Washington. And so you put those two things together, and a city that, I think over the years has been thought to be recession proof. You have lobbyists, you have all this activity, federal activity going on there, is in kind of a local recession. I mean, you live
Yeah.
in DC, you're in DC. Like, what is it like
Yeah.
there right now?
Well, I just checked before coming on, checked the unemployment rate. It did go up 5/10 of a percentage point to 5%. It is now 5%. It was
Hmm.
4.5% in May. In June, it went up to 5%. So it's creeping up there. The real estate market is now awash in homes and condos, and what have you. So that the real estate market, which was presumed to be recession proof, is going to take some hits. And I would say that there is a malaise over the city. There's a cloud hanging over the city. People are constantly worried that the economic um, environment is just going to get worse as people leave, as people stop spending money because of the general economy. And we're not just talking, obviously, we're not talking about the district economy in isolation. I mean, the broader economy is also in a tumult. Um, so there is a little bit of a gloom hanging over the city in conversations with people, your casual conversations with people in the supermarket or
Hmm.
stop. I mean, invariably they get to the economic situation, and it is not good. Um,
Yeah.
so it's hard to see how this stadium project, considering that there is, and this was a data point that came out in the 2 days of hearings that were held, public hearings that were held this week,
Hmm.
$1.3 billion hole over the next 3 years in the budget, in the city's budget.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I mean, it does make you wonder, like, can how can DC take on the burden of a major project like this at a time when they have this budget hole? At the same time, there's an argument to be made that, oh, well, infrastructure investment is one way that you can rebuild an economy, right?
That
Uh,
Mhm.
yeah, go ahead.
So that's also part of it. They're thinking of the job creation possibilities, and the commanders are going to try and get the shovels in the ground as soon as they can, as soon as
Mhm.
if the agreement goes forward and the council signs off on
What
it.
see what how are they what are they trying to hit in terms of a timeline? Like how long would it take?
They want to have the stadium up, running, and operational by 2030, which is
Okay.
just less than 5 years away at this point.
Right. Yeah.
Um, so that's what they're thinking of, and they admitted in the hearing on Wednesday. They had the team president, Mark Klotz, there, and he basically admitted that it was an aggressive timeline
Hmm.
to get this done. I don't know off the top of my head what the construction timelines are for stadiums in general. But it seems to me that that
Well,
that is
considering you got to demolish something and then build it from the ground up, and
that's
it's going to take some
that's going
time.
to be very tight.
And
And
it's not just RFK, right? It's the whole surrounding area. So like
it's
what are they planning for the surrounding area?
well, the surrounding area is going to be parking garages, which is another point. They
Okay.
want to build three parking garages that would have 8,000 spaces, which is
Okay.
very controversial point, and as well as the entertainment district, which I believe is supposed to be finished by 2036.
And what
Uh,
does that constitute? Just shops and
That's
restaurants or
that's
what?
going to be shops, restaurants. It's also housing. There is up to 6,500 units of housing that is going to come
Hmm.
with the site. And I believe that some of those are supposed to be online for the end of 2030, a portion of the housing.
Okay.
And the rest, I believe, staggered through, I want to say 2040. So there's housing, there's retail, there's hotels. I believe it's three hotels. Don't quote me on that, but there are several hotels in the mix as well.
All
There's
right. So, I
possible,
mean, that's like a big infrastructure project
yeah.
that could pay off with benefits in the future. But when you're talking about even aggressive, you're talking about 5 years before you see these things realized, and more like 15 when you're talking about all of the housing.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because one of the studies in the rush and part of the problem the mayor had is that she was seen to be in a big rush. So the chairman of the city council put the put the brakes on
Hmm.
and ordered up some studies. One of the studies um, found that building a mixed-use development without a stadium would actually earn the city more money over
Aha.
longer term. The stadium, a mixed-use development with a stadium, earns the city revenues faster, but overall, without a stadium would be more advantageous on the revenue front to the city. So,
Interesting.
but
And
that
is that because the stadium is, or like the Commanders are soaking up a lot of those
the
benefits?
commanders are soaking up a lot of the revenues, and parking garages are not massive revenue generators.
Right.
So,
Now, after the initial term sheet, there were some changes, right? And so the city does benefit to some degree from the
right
parking.
after the mayor came home with her initial term sheet and all the hullabaloo ensued. The city council chairman, Phil Mendelson, took control of the process and said, wait a minute, we're going to go back. And he came out with a modified agreement
Okay.
that resurrected some sales taxes. Now the city will get sales taxes on food, beverages, and merchandise that is sold at the stadium.
I
They
see.
will get a paltry um, uh, portion of the parking revenues for non-stadium events that can be used,
Non-stadium events.
which
Okay.
is basically like commuter parking and
Right.
festivals that are held on at the grounds around the stadium. So they were able to claw that sort of thing back in this modified agreement, which has made it into the legislation that they're voting on today. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's still the timeline is of concern, and that's provided they don't run into any environmental problems. It is on the banks of the Anacostia River, the second river in
Hmm.
Washington. Basically, there are two rivers that's, the Potomac that everyone knows of, and Anacostia, a smaller tributary into the Potomac. Provided there's no issues there, environmental issues, and provided there's no um, pollution that they need to remediate that again slows down the construction progress. There have been some folks who are concerned about that once they start digging, what are they going to
Right.
find?
Hmm.
Also, there's been interest in possible historical artifacts that they might find that might stop the
Okay.
construction to see what those are.
So, I think a lot of people might be listening to this and think, okay, the city has a $1.3 billion budget deficit over the next 3 years, and there's a $1 billion contribution to this stadium project. Uh, in reading your piece, it wasn't such a one-to-one thing. Like if
Mm.
they give this up, they can fill the budget deficit. But what
No, they
would
didn't.
these stadium costs be displacing? Like if they didn't do it, what could
What
where
could
would
they
that
fund?
money,
Yeah.
what could they do instead? Yeah.
One of the big projects that has really dismayed the criminal justice sector is what's known locally as the DC jail. It's the DC Corrections Facility. The current DC jail is basically crumbling. It's got some of
Hmm.
the worst conditions for correctional facilities in the country. It's got a laundry list of problems. The city was going to pay for that. Now it's being advertised, as you will. Well, what we're going to do now is we're going to do a public-private partnership with
Uh-huh.
this so that they are not on the hook for money that is now being funneled over to the stadium. So the city will now have to supervise that process in conjunction with a private entity. So that's one. So it's on the capital side where DC is going to run into problems, and the DC jail has been held up as sort of we should be focusing on this. We should be focusing on providing a
Hmm.
humane environment for people who are in the facility. And yet now we have to do that in conjunction. It kind of slips out of our control a little bit in conjunction with a private entity. So
I see.
that is the primary project that people are pointing to.
So instead of fixing a crumbling jail system and whatever other improvements need to be made in the city, a lot of capital and social capital, as well as political capital and financial capital, are going to be put into
Yeah.
this stadium project. So, you know, it's interesting what you said before, talking about what could be placed at that RFK site, and how the economic benefits would play out if there wasn't a stadium there and they just did something specific, that wasn't reliant on a stadium. What could they do at that site on the Anacostia?
Well, the big thing that opponents of the stadium project have talked about is housing. Really, really, there's a strong desire for housing. There's not enough affordable housing. There's not enough workforce housing. There's not enough
Okay.
housing um, for the demand.
And you said there was something like 6,500 units that were
Up to
scheduled
6,500.
for the
Yeah.
RFK plan. How much could you put in there without the stadium?
I've seen figures 10 to 15,000
Okay. So that's
for
significantly
that.
more. That's almost up.
You would
Could be
basically be
double, could be
creating,
close.
yeah, you
Okay.
would basically be setting up a brand new neighborhood
Right.
of uh,
And there are not a lot of cities in the country that have like a site where you could do that. I
right,
mean,
right.
like this is a serious amount of infill, and that there are other cities in America that are fairly built out.
Mhm.
Maybe you'd have to go to something like Detroit, where you'd find like entire large
Not tired,
swaths
right, with
of a
these
neighborhood that would be
parcels,
able to
yeah.
be built out.
And it would be rental housing. It is still federal land, and I believe there are no you cannot have home ownership opportunities on federal land, so it'd be
Mm,
rentals. But still, that's a really massive amount of property where you
right.
could do that. And so there's a lot of disappointment that there is no housing there. Retail is another component that people really would like to see more of on the across the banks of the Anacostia River. That the two sections of the city there are food deserts. And
Yeah.
there's no full, I don't say there's no full, I believe there are only two or three supermarkets on the other side of the river. And you've got hundreds of thousands of people that are relying on that side of the river, and there's next to nothing there as far as grocery resources.
Is this site near that bridge? Like you did a story
Oh,
like
the
a
federal,
year ago about a bridge, maybe it was a couple of years ago, about a bridge that was on the Anacostia that was crumbling, and there was it was a question about infrastructure sort of
There
in the
was a
Biden era.
collapse. That is on the
Okay,
opposite side
so
of the
that's
river.
not anywhere near this.
It's not near there, but it's kind of it sits into this concern about disinvestment.
Right,
And that's the other thing is that the council member for this um, area sees the stadium as a symbol of investment in an area that has been neglected for a long time. It's predominantly African American,
right,
and residents, African American residents in particular, are not only really excited about having the team come back, but they're excited about all these opportunities
right,
for jobs, for recreational facilities. That will be on offer with the stadium. There's a sportsplex that's going to be built, which is going to focus on opportunities for youth sports, and yeah, there's a lot that wards, what's known in the city as Wards 7 and 8, the two
hmm
predominantly African American wards, see as a benefit, and
okay.
a lot of people are strong proponents in those neighborhoods for this project.
Well, that's interesting because let's get into talking about sort of the community reaction here. We did have a comment in the comments from Jared saying, if any community organizations come up with their own formal alternative master plans. I'm not sure that that's been the
No,
case,
they
but
haven't.
what has the community reaction been to this project?
I would say the community known as Kingman Park, which is immediately adjacent to the stadium. It's an African American neighbor, predominantly African American neighborhood, purpose built in the 1920s for African American families, is opposed
Hmm.
to the project, basically because they've lived the commander's experience with parking issues and traffic issues. Lack of traffic enforcement has been a big
Mm,
uh, point of contention, and they don't want to. I'm sure they would rather see a housing rather
right.
than a huge mega project like a new stadium. The further away you get from the stadium, um, the more African American communities are interested in having the stadium because of the nostalgia, which we talked about
Right.
earlier, with a team that won 3 Super Bowls and had the first African American quarterback to win a Super Bowl. So there's a lot of that in there. However, the most recent polls have shown citywide opposition to
Mm.
the stadium. Um,
Opposition, but is it intensity? Like you did a piece for us about a stadium in Philadelphia, a deal that
right,
eventually
right up.
collapsed,
Yeah,
that was going to be downtown. And there was pretty strong opposition
right.
within that community, protests, organizing, things like that. Would you say that it is the same in Washington or less pronounced than what
Less
was happening in
pronounced would
Philadelphia?
be an understatement compared
Right.
to Philadelphia. In
Okay.
Philadelphia, the nostalgia for first of all, I should say the problem in Philadelphia is that you were actually the stadium facility was actually right up against the neighborhood.
That's
And
right.
people were going to be, and businesses were going to be displaced or greatly inconvenienced by the construction and threatened by the economic activity in the new arena
Right.
would displace the kind of mom and pop businesses in Chinatown. This is the
Right.
Chinatown neighborhood in Philadelphia, which, unlike Washington, if you're familiar with either, Chinatown, Philadelphia is a really vibrant Chinatown, like Chinatown
Right.
in New York,
Right.
where the Chinatown, Philadelphia is, in Washington is depressed. So there was a huge citywide outcry about the arena. Now, also in Philadelphia, there's a purpose-built section for sports teams. where they have
Right.
traditionally played. That really doesn't exist anywhere else. Well, I won't say anywhere else in the country. There
It's
may be,
unusual.
it's unusual.
Especially the recent trend is to put these things in
in
neighborhoods
in
downtown.
yeah, downtown. And the cry pretty much was put them down in South Philadelphia where
Yeah,
the
just
bar
leave them
has
there. Yeah.
been, leave them there. Everybody can get there. The suburbanites can get in off the highway really easily, and city residents can take the subway to the stadium.
Right.
So there was kind of a general feeling of why are you messing with
Right.
Chinatown? Um,
And indeed, that's what happened, right?
yeah, that's pretty much.
They went
Well,
back to the sports complex.
they went back to the sports complex, but interestingly enough, Josh Harris, the
Yeah.
managing partner of the Commanders, he's an operator. So what was he doing? He was not only was he negotiating with Philadelphia, which
Right,
actually,
because we should say the
yeah,
guy
they're even.
who is the head of the Commanders is also the owner of the Philadelphia 76ers, which was
Exactly.
trying to build that stadium in Chinatown.
In tandem with his negotiations with the city, and the city council in Philadelphia voted to approve it. So he had an approval in hand. He was
Right,
also negotiating with the governor of New Jersey and the governor of Delaware to move
right,
them either to Camden, New Jersey, or to Wilmington, Delaware.
right.
But he was also negotiating with his own landlord, who held the lease
Comcast,
for
yeah.
the facility, Comcast, in South Philadelphia. And it turned out Josh Harris decided to stay in the South Philadelphia site with a new arena. They're going to build a new arena, but they're going to do it at the old site. So
Right.
the
And
city,
I'm sure having that yes vote from the city council helped him, gave him a
they gave
lot of
him the
leverage in
it
those
gave him a lot of
negotiations.
leverage. And that's the interesting thing. He used that for leverage. Interestingly, in DC, DC has a lot of leverage. Um, Unlike Philadelphia, where he had options,
Yeah.
Josh Harris wants to be at RFK. Okay, Josh Harris is actually from this region,
Hmm.
and so he's from the DMV. So
Would
he
there
is
be other
subject.
options elsewhere? Like how are Maryland and Virginia responding to this?
Maryland, the governor of Maryland, Wes Moore, has pretty much said that he's concentrating on other options. Now, for me as a reporter, giving what I saw in New Jersey and Delaware, people can
Hmm.
say a lot of things, and you have to kind of parse out their statements
Right.
with practically a dictionary to see what might they really mean. But Westmore has made no indications that he is interested in that site and has
I mean, there's a stadium there right now. I guess
He
the
has
option would
said
be retaining that
returning
the
that site,
commanders
but
at in Landover.
in Lander, but he has also said whether we do it with the commanders or without the commanders, we want to see something, we want to see development at that site. And it's the with or without that's kind of, okay.
Right.
Virginia has
What?
been very quiet. Did
Okay.
you? Yeah, Virginia,
My question was like, what development? Like,
new
what is
development.
needed around the Landover site? Is it just the stadium there, and so they want
It's
to
just
build
the stadium there. I'm not
housing or
as
whatever?
familiar with the Landover site, but it's not well regarded as far as what's there now.
Right.
It's
It's just something
presumably,
people, yeah, they parachute in, parachute out for games, and that's
and
it.
that's it. Yeah,
Right.
it's not a well regarded site. What they would do with it, considering that Maryland has its own budget problems,
Right.
very serious budget problems, is anybody's guess at this point. It would
And
actually.
and clearly, if that is the case, and they're not wanting to invest, that like they wouldn't throw a counter offer up to keep the commanders in Maryland, is what you're saying.
No, apparently they made a counter offer before.
Oh,
Um, Not a counter offer, but they made an offer, is my understanding.
mhm.
Um, Before Harris turned his attention to Washington, that didn't go anywhere.
Okay.
So, but as far as has been concerned, they have not really been in this because I think that Governor Youngkin, who failed to move the
Yeah.
Wizards and the capitals to Virginia learned his lesson. He paid a political price in not consulting with the state legislature, primarily the African American woman who was a Senate leader that he needed to talk to, who had the power of the purse. Didn't consult with her. She put the kibosh on it, and they stayed in DC. So Virginia, I don't think is interested
All right. So
interested in
this is
going down that
interesting
road
then.
anymore.
So Youngkin's once bitten, twice shy. Moore is not really interested
Mhm.
in countering any kind of deal. So whereas Harris had options in Philadelphia, he kind of doesn't have options. It's kind of DC or bust. And I guess bust would mean, I mean, this is the question. What would bust mean? They stay in Landover or,
That's the
because one,
question. That's the great
yeah,
unknown, because as far as the vote is concerned, um, they don't seem to, unless there are some negotiations that have been going on way out of sight.
right.
He wants to get, he wants to get
The
to
RFK
the
deal.
dotted line on this deal. So it's really anybody's guess, and I'm gonna, just check in and see
Okay.
where they are with this vote. Um,
I mean that what's interesting is because what happens a lot in these stadium deals, you've covered a lot of them, is that there's a way in which the owners kind of play different regions off
they
against
play
one
for some
another and
reason.
they use that threat like we're going to abandon you as a city. We're going to, I mean, you mentioned this in the story, like this specter of what happened 40 years ago when in the dead of night, Baltimore packed up a bunch of trucking vans and moved to
Drove out.
Indianapolis.
Mhm.
This is like this great fear that cities have. Oh, we're not going to be a world-class city anymore. We're not going to have sports teams and they're gonna basically abandon us. Like, to what extent is that playing a role here if Maryland and Virginia aren't really involved?
That's a very good question to which I don't have an answer for you, because no other city or state has been floated as an alternative, to my
Right,
knowledge.
right,
Unless the only thing that, and this is pure speculation, that there's some glimmer that Maryland might be involved. But again, that's speculation.
right.
Might still be on the table, but I don't see that flying with the state legislature, for example, in Maryland because of their financial problems. So it's anybody's guess. I think that
And if the near
hard,
term, like
the
yeah, go ahead.
the leverage, the thing is that the council has a lot of leverage to
Right,
drive a harder deal with Josh Harris than I think that they want to. They are so afraid, this for the stadium supporters. There are stadium opponents on the council, but the stadium supporters are so afraid that Josh Harris is going to run that um, I'm not sure that they're looking around to say, what are Josh Harris's other options at this
right.
point?
It's like, oh, we're afraid he's going to run, but where's he going to run to? I
That's
mean,
the thing.
the regional options seem very limited, and then you go further than that, and there are 32 teams in the NFL. Where are they going to go? Toronto, Mexico City, like
Yeah,
what's
exactly.
going to
Well,
happen
the
here?
interesting thing is that when the city council president said, "Hey, we don't like this. We're not getting any sales tax. Are you kidding us?"
Yeah.
The team came back and said, it's almost like the scene in the the black and white classic Casablanca. Oh, you didn't like this price? Well, here's another price.
Okay.
We'll give you some options. They came back pretty quickly with with a community benefits agreement and some concessions on the taxes. The one thing that they didn't come back with, and we've talked about this offline, is um, the PSLs, the personal seat licenses, that
Right.
they don't seem to want, the team doesn't seem to want to give up taxes on those. But they came around pretty quickly on something that was an embarrassment for a mayor, far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, sure, because she wasn't asking for that in the first place.
He
And
wasn't
and
asking.
it's a recognition that they don't have a lot of options. This isn't like there's another story brewing here with respect to stadiums in
Yeah,
Missouri and Kansas, where the Chiefs and the Royals play in a sports complex, kind of in Missouri. And of course, Kansas City is right across the border between Missouri and Kansas, and they're talking to Kansas about, oh, what if we moved over there? What would you give us?
right.
And so now they're pitting Missouri and Kansas in this kind of bidding war. But we don't have that here, which
That's not
means
how
that
that's not
the
happening here.
council could have said, oh, you want a stadium? Here's what we need. And Bowser just kind of gave him the farm before even asking that question, it seems like.
Well, that's been part of the complaints about this whole process. It's been backwards. Instead of starting with public hearings and getting getting the pulse
Mm-hmm.
of the communities, they didn't do that. They had public, and basically Bowser came back and says, I have a deal, rather than let me
Right,
listen to all the communities and see what they want, and then I will take that information and go negotiate a deal
right.
in conjunction with the council. It's been completely flipped from the
Yeah,
usual process.
got
And
it.
that's been a big complaint. Economists have pointed that out, that particularly if the commanders are successful with this deal, it could be a template for other teams.
Right,
Basically, railroad a community into signing on to something up front, and then say, you want to talk about it? But we have this deal already, pretty much set
right.
in stone, and we're happy to hear what you have to say. But so in that respect, DC lucked out in that the council aggressively turned around and said,
Right.
we're not doing this as it
Right.
stands. We got a less bad deal. Whether they could get a much better deal remains to be seen, and will depend on what the vote is today.
Yeah. So I
The
want to
first
talk.
vote.
Yeah, this is the first of
This is the
several. And I
first
want
vote,
to,
and there's another vote in September.
right. I want to talk about that, but maybe first, before we get to that conclusion, we should bring up the role, the ever-present role of Donald Trump in all of this. So, just as this vote was nearing completion, maybe in a way to distract from his many problems. Trump came out on Truth Social and said, "Oh boy, the Commanders really need to change that name, and I will block this stadium deal if they don't change their name back to the Washington Redskins as we knew it in the 1980s and 90s and 2000s." My question is, what role can the federal government and Donald Trump in particular really play in this deal? Because as you say, it's just a federal site that is being leased to the city. So what can they
It
actually
is
do
being
here?
leased to the city, but DC is basically um, controlled by the federal government.
Right,
They have budgetary power over the federal government, and to a certain extent, they can dictate terms. It's their land. It's still their land. The DC has a lease,
right,
um, but it is still federal land. They still control it. So yes, the White House, President Trump still can put his finger on the scale in whatever way he may choose. By the same token, he can also pressure the commanders on the name.
right.
Now, we've seen what happens across the country with different institutions when the president, applies this pressure. Um, Josh Harris and his partners are subject to the same pressures.
Have they
Uh,
said anything about this?
well, they have not said anything specifically. However, the New York Post, and we know, those of us in the media know, that the president is a avid reader of the New York Post. Um, has basically speculated that the team is concerned about that.
That
That
they're
they may be pressured to change the name. Right now, the team has basically said we're not changing the name. We're not
Aha.
changing the name.
Officially, they've
That
said that, but there's some under the surface concern.
they're under the surface concern that there may be some
Well,
pressure
look, and
exerted.
it falls in line with a
Yeah,
lot of what Trump's been able to do when he is in a position where he has leverage. So, with Paramount, they needed a merger sign off from the federal government. And look what happens. They settle a very frivolous lawsuit between Trump and 60 Minutes, and then Stephen Colbert is out the door. With respect to universities, we saw
mhm,
this week on top of the Columbia deal, we saw a deal with Brown University, and there are rumblings that Harvard's going to follow suit. This is because the leverage is there from Trump and the federal government with respect to federal grants to
right,
research
exactly.
institutions, to basically NIH grants.
Right.
So we've seen this over and over again that when Trump has leverage in this second term and he tries to get something that he wants, that the institutions cave.
The
And so the
institute.
question is, will the commanders fall into the exact same trend as Paramount, as Harvard, or maybe Harvard, but
That's
definitely Brown and them?
that's the question. That's the question, and it is as yet unknown. The other, I guess, factor in this is what will the NFL, does the NFL have any,
Mm-hmm.
way to exert any pressure on the White House because it's the NFL. It's hard to know where the pressure.
Right. I mean, you can go up against Paramount, you can go up against Brown University and Columbia University, but the NFL is, as far as institutions go, they don't get much bigger or more influential
Yeah, I
in this
mean,
country.
the president likes to go to games and, what have you, and use it as a forum to reach out to the people. So um again, I would be
And it's not like
speculating
locally
what.
there was this claim that Trump made that there's actually an outcry. Everybody wants to rename the team back as the Redskins. That's not a thing.
If he had said something like that closer to when the controversy ensued, maybe he could
Like at
have,
the outset.
yeah,
Yeah.
at the outset in 2020. But people have reconciled themselves. The Commanders made a big push to really get people to embrace the name, and they've been successful in that. I'm sure there
Right.
are some holdouts, some diehards who would like to see the former name restored, but I think for
Right.
the larger fan base, they may not be happy with Commanders, but it's okay.
Got it.
All is forgiven that you gave us such a stupid name.
All right. So then, as you have alluded to, there is a vote going on, I think right now, but it's
It's
not
going
the
right now.
vote.
I've been checking.
It's
It has not, they haven't.
this is an initial vote. Take us through the process by which this will be determined in the next couple months.
Well, it is, that's a question mark as to what happens next. They're voting on legislation. It's unclear to me if there are sticking points in the legislation, if amendments can be made, if new legislation can be offered, if there are things that that the city wants to see, because people have said, well, if you don't get it signed on the dotted line, right away at the outset, you're going to have a hard time negotiating going forward. The next vote is September 17th, but my guess at this interim period is to let the situation cool down a bit,
Hmm.
as it has been pretty heated, and then see what can be negotiated. WMATA, the transportation authority here in DC, has been very quiet about their role in all of this,
Right.
because
Is there a metro stop there
there's a
currently?
metro stop there that would need to be renovated.
Mm.
And uh, there have been calls for an infill station to build another station some blocks away that would also serve the stadium. But they've been very quiet. So it's unclear what they are willing to do or not to do in all of this. So that's one thing that needs to be hashed out.
Hmm.
Then there's the community benefits agreement, which I think people are now happy with, but it's such a paltry amount of money. It's 50 million over 30 years, which is like $1.6 million a year for 30
Thanks.
years.
Yeah.
It's not a lot of money, but again, these teams have successfully convinced communities that this is really generous. But when you break it down at today's prices,
Right.
it's not much money on an annual basis for recreation, for example, or
Right.
what have you, for the surrounding communities.
So, final question. You said that this basically could be taken up as a template for how in the future other cities and other teams try to get stadium deals with their communities. I think a lot of people are frustrated that you have these owners of sports teams that are among the richest people in the world,
Yeah.
and yet they come asking municipalities that usually are pretty budget strapped for large amounts of money to support things with questionable economic benefits. And so the question is, if this is a template, uh, will that be accepted by the populations of these other cities? Which, maybe Washington accepted, but there has been a lot of anger, I think, in other cities
Mhm.
around this dynamic of the richest people in the world asking for handouts.
I think the lesson here in Washington, which can be applied to other cities, is you don't let one person go off and negotiate with a team. You make sure that you have others, you have city council. Obviously, the mayor can do that. But you want to do either put your finger on the scale from the beginning that no, you shouldn't be doing this on his own. You need to bring along other folks, or you do what the council president did. You come back with a deal, and the city council president said, "This is not acceptable. Sorry."
Right.
And we're going to fix it. And
Right.
this is how we're going to fix it. And we're not going to sit still for that. I think, the lesson from Philadelphia is you got to get out in the streets if you don't like. I mean, the Philadelphia Chinatown literally led the city response and
Yeah.
got out in the streets. Yes, the city council um, signed off on it, but the team realized that they had a lot of hostility in the surrounding community. And ideally, you don't want that.
Right.
Uh, you don't want that either. And do these people get voted back in? And that's probably something to leave you with is that Muriel Bowser is up for reelection next
Mm.
year. Does she get this deal?
Right.
And one of her prime contenders is another city councilman who's opposing Robert White, who is on the city council, who is a outspoken opponent who
Mm.
thinks that this deal is not strong enough
Right.
and has run against her in the past. So that's what you're going to be looking at. If she gets the deal, she might be in a good place going into reelection, or if opponents can successfully make the case that she um, flubbed the first time and had to be rescued by the city council. And you need somebody who can drive a harder bargain with billionaires when they come calling for city resources. Um, we shall see.
Well, it's a fascinating story, and it's a larger story about economic development in cities that are experiencing a lot of upheaval. Obviously, the whole concept of we build a central business district and people come downtown to work isn't reality anymore with,
Right.
office vacancies and remote workplaces and things like that. And so I think cities are going to be looking for these other ways to
Mhm.
foster economic development. And you have these billionaires coming and saying, hey, how about becoming a sports mecca? That's a way to
Yeah.
foster economic development.
Entertainment. It's like, you
Yeah.
don't like sports? We got restaurants, we got
We
stores,
got it
you know.
all.
Yeah.
And you know,
And
it's
it's
going
on
to
a
be
river.
fascinating. It's going to be
Yeah.
fascinating to see how cities respond to this. And
Yeah.
Washington is an interesting test case, particularly because of the economic stress in the city already. Gabrielle Gurley, thank you so much for being here on the Weekly Roundup. We do this every Friday afternoon at 12:30 Eastern, 9:30 a.m. Pacific. We put this on our website at prospect.org. You can check it out there, and you can come on back, tell your friends. At our YouTube channel, our channel is The American Prospect on YouTube. You'll get a reminder for when these weekly roundups happen if you sign up. So do so. Get your friends to subscribe too. Thank you very much and have a great rest of your day and a great week.